guess.
Yeah. Okay, have I just started?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So she's going to do
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Is the microphone working? How about now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's start off with our Pledge of Allegiance. A couple of announcements. Hey, we got everybody here. We completed our board retreat. It was done in a very vigorous and appropriate way to air our views on how we can always get better, and with emphasis on how we can always get better. That's the purpose of the retreat, to talk and often do that in a way that allows us to have more effective meetings throughout the year. So I think we did very well with that. I think everybody left there with a much better sense of how we can get better, and we look forward to progressing that way through the year. I don't have any more other announcements, so let's start off with a motion to adopt an agenda. Can I get a motion, please? First, Mrs. Hoffman, second, Mrs. Stevenson. All in favor? Okay. These meetings are study session meetings designed for the purpose of having administrative updates for the board. There are no public comments. Residents may attend the next scheduled meeting on September 10th and or contact the board by email at boc@oceana.org with any comments or questions. All questions come into the Office of the Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and our superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions and concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and our designee. So that's the ground rules on these meetings. Let's start off now with superintendent comments, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just a few comments before we get into the information item. Believe it or not, this is the last week, the crunch week in many ways, and you'll hear a little bit when we start talking about construction. A lot of things have been happening this summer. It's been a very, very busy summer in many ways. And like most summers and all summers, we always say, at the end of it, we'll figure it out and kids will come back and it'll be a better experience for them. So we're looking forward to next week, which then brings me to the two items. We have Superintendents Conference Day on the 3rd. So we're certainly inviting our board members to be present for that. We have two similar to last year, and each year we're getting better at it. So we'll be with the instructional staff in High School West, High School East, starting at 7:45, 8 o'clock. Then myself personally will be transitioning into High School West, where we'll kick off session with non-instructional staff. I think the agenda says 9 o'clock for me, but I'll share those agendas with the board, so you have an opportunity to engage with both set of employees. The second piece is our opening day tour. It's always a great opportunity for board members, if you have the time, recognizing it is a nice time commitment. We start around 7:30 at High School East and tour all the buildings, and by the time we're done, it's about 12. So it's a nice commitment. If you're coming, wear comfortable shoes. It's a lot of walking, but it's great. Again, another opportunity for, as a board members, to kind of see things happening, to express your appreciation to the wonderful work that people are doing, and just to build those relationships. So we're looking forward to both of those things as we kick off school. Want me to just continue on this piece of it? As Mr. President gets to a great thing too. Also, the new calendars are out, so board members have copies at their places. And while this is out, it became outdated the minute it was printed. So we advise and encourage people to go to the website and follow the district calendar on the website as much as you can. Mrs. DeFisciano is very good about keeping that current based on information she's getting from building, but it's a great resource. It's always been a great resource for the community, continue to be a great resource for the community. So talking about being busy, a big part of being busy was construction. And we have the Freeman Group here as well to talk about some things. And if I'm not mistaken, I think what's connected here are some photos. And so maybe, Augie, you can stand up here and you could be, I'll be the analyst, you could be the color commentator. How's that? And so broadly, for the board and for the public to know, the construction this summer, we were trying to accomplish a couple things. On the campus and the roadways, the primary focus is how do we create a better flow of traffic on the campus as well as onto the campus. So keeping that in mind is where we really started thinking about and shifting some roadways, shifting some parking lot areas, and so that was a large focus, how to create a better flow on the campus. And so what you see is some of this piece here. So Augie, if you want to just comment briefly on what we see on the screen.
Sure. I mean, the first photo here, this is, or was, the tree line between where the buses used to be at East and the new parking lot. So what we've created as part of the traffic flow, the southern part of the old parking lot will become buses only. Keep the students and cars out of the bus. The other part closer to the main campus road, the other half, if you look where the light pole bases are, that's cars.
Augie, help me out. The bell, the Carillion.
Yes.
Help me,
To the
get me from there.
left,
To the-
brilliant to the left,
Yeah.
You're
will
looking
be,
at-
Parking.
that massive parking lot's
Yep.
actually two parking lots.
Student
One is
parking over
buses.
here, the new parking over there. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
A little more than half of that is for buses only.
Okay.
So they will create a U shape in there in the morning and afternoon. The kids will walk down the new sidewalk. You notice there's a new sidewalk now that separates the road to the circle. The point of that whole separation is nobody can jump from the parking lot to the circle or vice versa. The thought process and the whole traffic study was, we need people to go where they're going, get there and leave. Like, much as we like you, your thing, try to get out, because the traffic jams was the killer.
Yeah.
So as you come in from Mo, now you'll see it looks like it's 6 lanes wide, because it is almost 6 lanes wide. Far right-hand side coming in is the through traffic. Like, you're headed to west or other side of campus, get in the right-hand lane and go. The first thing you'll notice is going to be the new turn-off.
So Augie, so hold on, man. You see, you're the color commentator here. So you got jumped into the fourth quarter, and we just had the first snap in the game. So back to this piece now. So we're still warming up. Augie's celebrating. So this what was, and gradually this became what is. Just to kind of give you some context, and now if you take a ride to the campus, you see the final piece of it. So that's, yes.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
There's three, because I screw it up every time. There's one entrance, two entrance, three entrance if I want to get to the fields. If I want to get to the turf, it's like all the way down now.
If you want to go to turf,
I'm coming in from Mo.
if you come in from Mo, there's two.
I thought we had an aerial one on
It's
that.
probably the last one from up in the boom truck.
I'm sorry, Dr. Roberts.
No, it's okay.
I tell you, I need a map because I'm driving it and I'm like, what am I doing? It's all right, just keep going. Oh,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
When you come in,
It's still two. How we get
No,
to
no,
three?
it's three.
It is three.
Hit that one.
So you have,
there's only two.
so,
Two to the turf.
Right.
yeah,
The first one, all the way down, brings you to the back of East or the new parking lot.
Right.
The second one right here is the circle only. You will only be able to get to the circle.
circle.
Drop off and leave.
Yeah.
The next one gets you to the big parking
This is
lot.
the
Right.
existing one.
It's the
It is
third
three.
one.
I know, that's what I.
No, so let's clarify. This will go down around the circle. You can't turn to get to the turf.
there anymore,
No,
right?
No, there's
no,
no parking
there's
area.
no, this one is the existing one now that
Right.
goes down, but it stops and goes into the parking lot. It doesn't go all the way down to the end.
Okay.
It stops and goes to what we call the student parking lot.
Right.
The one that's not here, that's further down by the tennis court,
That's the new one.
gets you in and out, potentially into the student parking lot by the athletic field. So there's only two ways to get into that. The existing one that turns into the parking lot, that doesn't go around the circle anymore because we created a new circle road,
Okay.
and or the one by the tennis court.
Okay.
And so this parking lot up here is accessible by people going in and out to that parking lot from this side. And further down is the bus one that's also accessible from that piece. Again, we want to keep the flow traffic from the circle, just circle out.
Out, right.
Okay.
And so we don't have that circle, student parking lot, all those things that created congestion or added to the congestion.
So is the back the same? Do you still have buses going in the back?
Yeah, we haven't changed anything to the back pattern.
Okay, that's exactly.
The only difference is we pulled the car traffic out of the buses in the front.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump.
No, that's no problem. And so this again, more pictures of the parking lot.
That's the old drive that used to go to the circle, and that black part now is new parking.
So remember I said you could only go down,
Yep.
so we
That's good.
cut this off, so you could come here, and you turn in.
Right.
All this now gonna become parking.
Parking,
This is this before you should be able to go down the circle. This was a circle right here, go down and come around and come back out. Now you're coming in and you turn into the parking lot.
Right.
And so we expanded some parking opportunities by getting rid of what was road now becomes the parking spaces.
How many more spaces?
Um,
50, right?
I don't-
50?
There's 20 new ones there.
And there's some back up here too, right?
Those will be the same ones they always.
Yeah, but we just paved them over.
And then you have that new driveway by the tennis
Yeah.
courts then going into, so you get two.
So we added more roads, added more parking. So people who want to say that, oh, you guys got rid of parking, we actually added more
Yeah,
parking.
it looks good.
But we still didn't add enough parking for all the parents who would love to send all their kids to school and drive. That's not the intent. So that's the road. So you want to go back up, August? So
We'll go back.
another big piece that we're focused on is the cafeteria at High School West, which is right now the one that we have our fingers crossed on in terms of getting that work done. This is some High School West cafeteria work, right?
Yes, east.
High School East, I'm sorry. So a lot of it is just gutted out. This is roof stuff, not in particular order. But a lot of the entire cafeteria was gutted out. And so what you see now doing that, so what's the prognosis, Augie? We still,
As we are, right now, we are in the painting and finishing stages. We will not have every single thing complete because the biggest issue we have is the ballistic doors. We elected to go with true ballistic doors on all the cafeteria, the 4 entrances to the cafeterias.
What's a ballistic door?
bulletproof.
It is a real bulletproof door.
Oh, okay.
It's
Gotcha,
resistant,
gotcha,
this is
gotcha.
an actual bullet.
Yeah.
Got it.
We had never ordered that, we had no idea how long it takes. And as of tonight, I still can't tell you how long it takes. We ordered them in April and we still don't have them, and there's no date.
Wow.
So when they arrive, we will probably take Christmas or February or whenever, but we will take them out at that time and swap them.
So we're gonna have
Until
existing doors there till then.
The existing doors
Okay.
will stay.
Okay.
There's some sound panels that we're making for the middle schools and the east that have become remarkably difficult to get for some reason. They won't be here till October. It won't stop us from using the facility, but some of the finished stuff will just, you can't, like, we can't hang the new TVs and stuff till they're up. So, we're gonna have to wait on some of these details. But our plan right now is that Katie was there this morning, we walked around, we anticipate being able to serve food, have kids have lunch. Most of the lighting will be in, most of everything we need to function will be there, but we'll be working nights and weekends to get the balance of the pretty things done.
So again, I encourage you, if you haven't done so already, kind of drive to the campus. The road change up here by Acadia and 146, I think that's probably going to be the most significant in terms of having a major contribution because it shifts everything back. It creates more stackability for cars that's coming off campus or right in the left signal, creates different lanes for that. And also, as you're going out here from Gowanna going towards, we created that right lane, which again creates more stackable, so cars who want to go right, not sitting behind cars that are waiting to go left, and so it kind of creates some more stacking in that area as well. And we'll have a kiosk drive off as people come onto the campus to be able to pull off and see. Similarly at Moe Road entrance, you're coming off, there'll be a kiosk pull off sign. The kiosk is not there yet.
Is that what that little dotted area for? It's so confusing.
So this one on 146 is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, this one, 146, is a little confusing, but the signage will help that piece of it now, because if you come off Mo, the sign's there to say this is, so the sign being there now, even though the kiosk isn't there yet, will tell people that this is what it's for.
Okay.
So the signage will help piece of it, and once we finish all the roadways, then we'll focus on where we're gonna put certain things, and so we don't wanna do something and dig it up because we configure. So that's the exciting part about the roadway piece. Augie mentioned, the cafeteria work is ongoing. We had a lot of cafeteria asbestos stuff in the elementary schools, some redoing the floors, so some pretty neat stuff across the district. Rain was an issue for us all over the place with roof and flooding. And so kudos to a lot of folks. And I'm particularly going to point Barb Staliker out because she was here many nights with her folks and calling up Augie and everyone else and saying, and here taking pictures and with her flip-flops because she's smarter than me. She wears shoes that don't get ruined when you're walking around in 2 or 3 inches of water. And so a lot of stuff happened, and that's the beauty of it, right? All this stuff happened kind of behind the scenes, and everyone shows up and it's ready. And so I think for as a board, it's great for you to have appreciation that there's a lot of moving parts. There's still a lot of moving parts. One area that I don't have photos of, and I haven't seen it yet myself, we had a little internal mini project that Barb championed, was the renovation of the Little Theater. I heard it's absolutely beautiful. So we add another dimension with that piece of it. So looking forward to seeing that project as well. Steve and a lot of his folks spend a lot of time in courtyards this summer, trying to clean up courtyards, spruce up courtyards, and make the courtyards a little bit more usable for folks. A lot of work on athletic fields. Athletic fields are tough. One, because of the treatment piece that we shifted to, it's taking a little longer. The organic approach is a little bit longer to maintain the fields. And as you know, sports are back in session. And so you get that treatment with wet, with use, there's always a potential of things. And so we're watching that very closely, but kudos to the maintenance grounds folks to have stuff ready for when the 900 plus kids come back to school. We're ready for that piece of it. So in general, a lot of good work taking place, and we'll probably have some things that we're going to dispute with contractors at the end of it in terms of who pays for the extra stuff. It's always the case, but the reality of it is we'd rather deal with that after the fact and have school ready to be open than have things delayed while we dispute and have school not ready to be open. So if there are any questions that's specific to again, Augie's here just to kind of fill in the gaps that you may have.
So during one of those microburst storms, my son and his friend were running, and they were over at high school east, and they said they saw a direct lightning strike on the tennis court. Excuse me. Was there any damage from that storm to the?
There was damage all over. I mean, you had
There
a
was
lot of
damage all
trees,
over.
if you'll notice, there's a lot of stumps that you didn't used to have. Your grounds folks had to take out a bunch of trees that just got blown over. So you had a lot of
There
limbs
was
down, a
significant
lot of
damage.
things this year that we hadn't. I mean, last summer, if you remember, we had the issue at East because of a crazy storm. Well, this year it seemed like every Saturday.
It was crazy.
Yeah,
storm.
it was crazy.
Unfortunately, it didn't impact our work because on Monday through Friday we were fine, but those Saturday night, Sunday night things were brutal. But you guys get hit with lightning fairly often.
Oh, we do.
Oh yeah, I've seen it more than once while we were working, so it happens here.
Yeah, what is that? I mean, why is that?
Flat,
It's just
pretty
flat?
flat, and you get a lot of crazy.
It's because we just have dynamic personalities. We attract lightning.
Yeah, it's magnetic.
But just one thing, again, recognize that we have several other items on the agenda. Yes, I'm sorry, Gary.
Okay. I just wondered if you'd walk us through the process. As a homeowner, for instance, if I want to build something, I have to go to the building department. I know we go to state ed, okay? But as a homeowner, they do a foundation footing, a foundation inspection, a framing inspection, an insulation inspection, electrical inspection, a final inspection, and then I get a CO. How does it work for us?
Yours is actually much easier. You don't have to deal with those folks at all. Everything is issued by state ed. Your building permit comes directly from SED. Between myself, the architects, and whichever engineering discipline, electrical, plumbing, we do all of the inspections for everything. We hire services for concrete because we don't have a testing lab. Compaction testing is also done by a lab. Air monitoring is also done by a different lab. So we hire all that out, but we coordinate all of that here, and that's how it all gets done here. So it starts with the architect doing the plans, SED says go, and we handle the rest, get it all done.
So as long as it's to our satisfaction?
Well, I mean, the drawings are made for SED and building, so we follow them religiously to make sure it works, and it's done per design, so it'll end up functioning as the engineers wanted it. And it's quite a few people involved with it, not like your house would be. There's any given time, there's 7 or 8 different architects, engineers, myself, and testing lab people who are quality control. So that's how it works here, and then we close it out at the end and move on to the next.
Thank you.
So, and related to that, great segue, Gary. All this then cause capital projects to take longer than most people anticipate because there's so much front work with the approvals. In fact, that's most of the time is, because when you think about it, we do all the actual construction in 2 or 3 months. And but yet the whole process is 2 or 3 years. And so a lot of that is that piece of making sure that once we get the stamp to go ahead, everyone knows that all the respective codes have been addressed, complied with, and things of that nature. So with that being said, that's the reason why when we approve referendum, typically if we're lucky, it's probably 18 months later that we actually start construction. And so as we start to unwind this project, this summer. Next summer, we'll be focusing on the technology wing at the high school, science classrooms at the high school. And so again, as well as we're doing a Smart School Bond Act across the district that we'll be looking at everything from phone systems and some more high-tech type things. And so next summer will be also another busy summer, and those are projects that were approved a year ago. And so you see the lag. And so the reason why so here's a kind of setup to this conversation, because one of the things that we'll do probably maybe late September, early October is reconvene the facilities committee that Mr. DeLallo and Mr. Gilbert are on, and led by Mrs. Chase, reconvene that committee to do a couple things. One, to kind of talk about where we finally with this project, where we ended with this project, the status report on all the approval for the ones that we're hoping that we're going to be doing next summer. And the third piece of it, start talking about referendum for a project that if the timing is right, we could be doing a referendum at the end of the year or some other point for a project that we probably won't be engaging in until 2022, 2023. And because we don't do that referendum now, we won't be doing that till 24, 25. So I share that with you because sometimes people wondering, well, you just finished something, why are you going to go out with a referendum? Because of the lag. And so we'll be looking to reconvene the facilities committee for those three purposes. Kind of see how we ended with this, where are we with the one that's planning this in the pipe, and how do we start looking at some things that we move forward, because we have some big pieces that, I mean, for instance, while right now everyone is enjoying the athletic field and the turf and the track, those things are going on 13, 14 years old. And so fast forward 2-3 years from now, it's 15 years old. The life of it, we thought about 10 to 12. And so now we're pushing it to potential of 15 to 16. So I just use that for an example of sometimes, things happen, we have to put in the cycle of things. Just one example. And we have tons of other stuff that we have on our facilities survey, if you will, that we know we need to do. Roofs are always ongoing type of things that we always have to do. So while we talk about construction and while people are excited about the construction, it's important for people to realize that we always have to keep the cycle going in order so we don't have a situation where we're putting out to our public a $200 million referendum. We'd much rather put out a $15, $20, $25 million referendums in chunks that's doable construction-wise as well as affordable than deferred maintenance and spend a whole lot of money on things that, quite frankly, if we were to plan it differently, we could have maximized efficiencies of scope and scale. So some plant that seed out there, because it's one of the things that we'll be having those conversations with the facilities committee probably as soon as we can schedule. I'm thinking maybe late September, early October, and then schedule a few meetings for the course of the year so that committee can start engaging in that process again. So exciting times for us, and it's important times for us to keep these things going, because we are evolving our facilities to meet the different needs and emerging needs of our students. And so it's pretty exciting stuff that's happening. Appreciate it, Augie.
Thanks, Augie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Augie.
As Mrs. Chase come forward, related to that too, so we always trying to look where we came from to understand where we're going. And one of the things that we do this year, and you'll have the audit report coming to us in October. So this is an unaudited assessment of our finances. You have the audit report coming to us in September. So this is kind of an overview that we do every year with the board, because I mean, you as fiscal stewards of the district, you need to know, hey, how did we really end? How do we end? And so this is kind of like the how do we end kind of conversation. So Kat, you want to walk from that?
Thank you. This year, we expended a little over 99% of our budget, and we realized a little over 100% of our revenue. So a good place to be. We had an operational surplus of $3.29 million, and I should mention that that's after we actually paid for our buses without borrowing with some of our surplus, and we also paid some BAN interest, which is bond anticipation note
Kat, 1
interest.
second. Which one you going to work on, the summary one or the chart?
The summary one. So, so that just gives you an overview of where we got to where we got. Looking at our salaries, instructional salaries, we had about 182,000 savings from our adopted budget. As we kind of run through every year, we had 15 retirements, 10 resignations, 71 leaves of absence. We exceeded our substitute line this year for the first time significantly by $137,000. The other thing that I forgot to mention, we also had a retroactive settlement of the STA contract that went back to 7/1 of 18. So all of those things fed into the savings of $182,000 this year. On the administrative budget, we had 2 resignations mid-year, Rose Beckett and Sarah Johnson. We also had a leave of absence for which we paid part of the year, we paid for a substitute. And we also had 2 retired administrators come on board to help us do teacher observations this year. So we actually overexpended our budget there by about $45,000. On the non-instructional side, again, we had 28 retirements, 42 resignations, 133 leaves of absence, and that's both paid, unpaid, FMLA, et cetera. Of those, 55 came from the transportation area. We do tend to hire folks that are looking for a second career, so perhaps that's not necessarily all that surprising. But I do think a lot of the overage this year came from lack of substitute bus drivers, lack of drivers in particular, leaves of absence, additional runs needed for discipline issues.
What does that mean?
So if buses have, and I think it tends to happen more so with the special education population, but either hard to handle kids for one bus attendant or the need to split up some students that don't ride well together. You know, we try to be creative with our bus runs to try to mitigate some of that. We also had some mechanics that were out long-term, so we needed a lot of overtime for some of that work as well. On the benefit side, I'm happy to say once again, we had significant savings, about $3.6 million from the original budget, and a big chunk of that came again from health insurance. We estimated by plan, based on what the carriers were telling us, anywhere from 7 to 12% increase, and we actually this year really kept almost a 0% increase. I think we're actually even a fraction reduced from last year. So that was certainly very helpful. You can see what the actual increases were by plan. Our rebates from our Boces consortium totaled about $1.7 million this year, which is huge, probably double from what we used to get in the past. So some good negotiating there, some good contract language there. And we also had 3 bargaining units that either in the beginning or mid-year increased their contribution rates by about 1%.
So Kathy, before you get off this, it's an important point, I think, not only for the board, but for the public. Health insurance is probably, other than, say, salaries, is our biggest singular cost unit. And so when we look at that, we're always trying to figure out how do we ideally try to reduce that cost, but how do we minimize the increase in that cost footprint? Because we know that if, in this case, if we keep the overall cost status quo, everyone benefits. Employees benefits because their premiums aren't going up, and as an employer, we benefit because our share of the premium is going up. So we really spend a lot of time analyzing the design of plans and things that we're spending money on and making sure it's, so that's where a lot of this comes from, working with our broker to try to figure out, you know, okay, what's the most, why we do spending money on this, why we spend money on that. The drug broker is a perfect example of having someone who's questioning you know, the cost of drugs that someone wants. Like, no, that's not, we're not going to pay. So those kind of things create opportunities for us, and we have to do it because otherwise costs could just spiral out of control very quickly, and we end up spending most of our budget increase on. So we really try to control those costs. I pointed it out because it helps everyone, helps the public as a whole, helps employee bargaining units as well. So even while in negotiations, we spend a lot of time looking at plan design. How do we adjust plan design that may have a very incremental impact on an individual employee, but have a significant impact in terms of the overall cost that we're paying, that we're all sharing that cost. So I want to point that out, and this is an indication of that. I'm trying to do some of those things moving forward.
And I've talked to some colleagues in other schools, and they're actually doing layoffs because their health insurance
Exactly.
cost is so excessive. So, so I think we've got a really good team going on, working for us here. Dental and vision, among other various plans, we're pretty much spot on, a little bit of savings there. Employees' retirement system, this one kind of surprised me. We had about $732,000 in savings, and I went back to see why. And obviously, as we hire new employees, they're in the higher tiers, tier 5 and 6, whereas the lower tiers, you know, people have been retiring on an ongoing basis. And while our average was about 14.9% according to the state in our tax cap calculation, a lot of our staff ended up being in the 13.1% level at tier 5 and 9.4% in tier 6. So we see quite a significant savings there. Teachers' retirement, 119.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
I think it's great we do that, we sort of have a hedge in there, but do you ever see this catching up to us where, let's say in future years, we may end up underestimating and then find out that it costs more than projected? So do you have sort of a breaker in there?
The answer to that is, the reason why this is kind of somewhat surprising, because the new tiers, the tier structure is still relatively new when you think something that's only been in place now for a handful of years. And so trying to figure out what's that trend. And so once we get a handle on what's the trend, then we can start then saying, okay, if the trend is this and the demographics of our staff, aging demographics going up, then we can start better anticipating what does that trend mean, because, I mean, and also the hiring pattern. I mean, we have a mix of people who are already in the system coming in at higher tiers, and a mix of people new to the system coming in lower tiers. And so it's almost kind of like, if you want to talk about from a longitudinal perspective, we're almost like in this space of really trying to get a handle on what's the trend line. And once we figure that trend line out, then we can start doing better predictions of what it's going to look like coming down the road. And so that's what you're seeing now. And so right now, do we have a complete grasp on it? No. So we kind of hedge to the error. Last thing we want to do is not have enough money, right? So now we have the trend line, and we start making those adjustments to say, where is that, you know, how can we make those margins a little tighter, but not so tight that we crossing our fingers at the end of the year. So that's like a new dimension, because you're going to see more and more young staff coming in at tier 5 and tier 6, and tier 3 is going to start fading out over, but that's 10, 15 years. You know, so where's that trend line? And that's what we're trying to figure that piece out. Because some people are working much longer than even in the past, in terms of people not retiring at the typical 55 anymore.
That's why the average is higher,
Yeah.
because you still have them in the system.
Okay, so teachers' retirement, pretty close there, 119,000 savings. Social Security, 278,000 savings. Again, that's based on salaries as well. Workers' comp, we had 288,000 in savings. Disability and life insurance were overexpended, which is a little unusual. Life insurance costs are going up significantly. In fact, we just met with our life insurance person today. So more to come on that probably. And disability, we do have, you know, accidents that happen not necessarily at work, with people going out on
Kathy, did we get a new workers' comp broker, or was it disability broker?
Workers' comp broker.
Yeah, so we're scrutinizing cases a lot closer now
Absolutely.
than in the past. We have a different broker that's doing it. So you see some of this too, savings. So the reason I'm pointing those things out to you as a board, because, you know, when you have $170+ million budget, we're squeezing around the edges. You know, a 0.00% savings translate to $100,000 or whatever it is. And so it may sound like a large amount of money, but when you think about the percentage, we spent 99% of our budget So when you think about that, it's not, individually, you may, wow, it seems like a lot of money, but we spent 99% of what we thought we were going to spend, which quite frankly is too tight. In our past history, it's been around 97%. And so the reason why, though, because we decided to do some big pay off some buses to try to unload some debt so we could do some forward planning on those kind of things. So very deliberate action, but still, it's still very much on point in terms of what we said to the public, what we're going to do and what we end up doing. So I want to put that in context for the board as well, because, there's many things we'll go through here, but don't lose sight of that context.
Kathy, when we underexpend a budget category, no big deal. But when we overexpend it, there's an internal process for transferring from one budget.
Correct.
Sometimes we're involved and other times we're not, or how's that work?
So how our process, the board, no, is not, because we don't have that process where board approve everything.
Right.
Board approves the budget, but how our process works, so I have to approve all final budget transfers. So it starts with the building, starts with department, goes to business office, and then it comes to me, and to make sure. So there are multiple tiers in that. And one of the things too that we watch is that if we're doing a ton of budget transfers, that means we didn't structure the budget very carefully in the beginning. When I say the budget, not the overall amount, but the allocation of funds. And so,
Right.
so we start looking at these kind of things, saying, okay, how do we make sure that the distribution of funds across the budget is such that we're not doing transfers all the time. Plus, you have limitations on transfers. You can't transfer from non-equipment code to equipment code, for example. The law doesn't allow to do those kind of things. So we have to be mindful of that. And the second piece, kind of forward thinking for you, we're going to report back to the board at some point, is that the whole law of, for next year, we have to look at the equitable distribution across the budget, which then adds a different dimension of how we then start looking at allocations and the distribution of allocations. So we know we're going to have these things happen. And so we look at the pool, we know it's going to have these things, but it shouldn't be for every little thing you're transferring all over the place, because that's the case. We didn't plan very well.
But I just want to add to his comment. If it's an emergency, because we replaced like a pump for the pool, and that was something you brought to the board for approval. So it
Yeah,
took you-
because the equipment piece, so certain things, yeah.
Certain things you have
Yeah,
to.
exactly.
So that's.
That's where the
okay,
stipulation comes
yeah,
from.
Okay.
We're just talking about equipment, so.
Speaking of equipment, so while it looks like we're overexpended and, that we transferred money in, we actually had $82,000 of carryover encumbrances that came forward from last year that added to our budget, as well as the SAVE pot of money and the Future Ready grant purchases. Those are pots of money that we didn't necessarily know what we were expending on, but ultimately we ended up expending more on equipment this year. So we got ahead of our plan a little bit and moving forward on our next phase, if you will, for some of those things. The contractual services, we did have some savings in utilities, about $500,000. And one of the good things about that is, as Steve West is new and Barb is digging right in and getting some of the projects done that have perhaps not gotten done over the past few years, we used a lot of those savings to get some things done, like the Little Theater, like purchasing equipment that eliminates the need for 2 people to do a job, and now it only needs 1 person to do a job. In fact, we talked a lot about that this year with Barb and Steve and even Al, and a lot of great ideas came forward that created efficiencies, and we utilized some of the savings in utilities to do some of those things this year. Yep, textbooks and library books. While we did have some savings here, $300,000 or so, we will be maximizing the instructional materials aid because we can reclassify between aidable purchases in software, hardware, and textbooks. So particularly in the software area and the hardware, we've far exceeded our aidable amount. So this is not bad news by any stretch.
So just to be the color commentator again, remember when Dr. Wood and folks came here presenting textbooks, we squeeze book companies because we're buying in huge volumes. And so, while we may, whatever our maximum, we're always trying to figure out how we maximize the state aid amount, we're trying to squeeze as much as we can, and so become either going to online resources or those type, to again, make sure we're getting the quality product, but at the best cost price point as we can. And part of our size allows us to do some of that a little bit more effectively than other places, because when we're buying for all fifth graders, that's a lot of kids, so I think that helps us quite a bit with some of these type things. So I share that with the board, because when we go into the planning process, I almost have to plan from a worst case scenario. You can't go and say, yeah, we're planning for all these kids, but all of a sudden it's not enough money, we can only buy for 80% of the kids. So what you going to tell the rest of the 20% of the kids? Sorry, we can't get to you till, so we kind of go into certain things with that kind of worst case scenario in mind, and we squeeze it. Same thing with utilities. We have no idea what the winter month's going to be like. And so we have to think about the worst case scenario. If we have the worst winter and have the highest heating costs, what does that cost? And plan for that. And so then anything else we squeeze, create opportunity points to do some other stuff that we may not have budget for, but we need to do. So that's where the whole thing comes from. We're talking about squeezing costs. We're not squeezing costs just for the sake of it. Squeezing costs create other opportunities to do things within the district without an additional burden on taxpayers.
Okay, moving on to Boces Costs. We did see some additional costs in the special ed area, which was identified fairly early on. That money came from the contractual costs of private placements as we moved them to Boces. And IMS had an over expenditure of $1 million, but literally utilizing savings from a lot of other lines that they had. They can purchase outright, or they can purchase from Boces and maximize Boces aid. So that's what they chose to do this year, in trying to ensure that they're doing the obsolescence plan and getting all of the devices in the hands of kids. Supplies, we were slightly overexpended. Again, we had adjustments from other areas, but in particular, we were over in the operations and maintenance areas from what was originally budgeted. But again, we got a lot of projects done this year, thanks to those guys all in that area back there. Transfer to other funds, fully.
Let me
Sure.
just something that's hit me, that we use the term overexpended. When you hear that term, it's kind of like Bob saying he gave me $10 and I went out and spent 20. So now we're $10 in the hole. That's not what we mean. We mean that our adopted budget was 20, but we actually had 30 coming from another source. So in this year we spent 50, but the budget was 20, but we had other sources of revenues to do that. So I want to make sure that the whole term, and so we probably need to change that term. It's not overexpended, it's beyond. So I just want to make sure to clarify that piece of it, because it's not that as a result of this we're in a hole.
Right.
It's that what we budgeted in this line was X, but we brought some other resources in, that we expended some things in this line, that all of a sudden what we budgeted for, we're spending more in that line, but it's from funds coming from other venues, be it transfers or otherwise. So I just want to make sure that.
You overexpended that line.
Exactly.
But the bottom line.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure people understand that. So,
99%, not 100%.
exactly. It's not that all of a sudden we had a deficit
Right.
in this.
Right.
So it's not, overexpend is not opposite of deficit.
Right.
So it
And
makes
I
sense?
was going to
Mhm.
say,
Okay. Yeah,
I did
exactly.
try to explain that from the adjusted budget, after we did our transfers, we had 191,000 in savings. So while the original budget might have been overexpended, after we did our transfers, we had savings in that line. So timing issues. Transfers to other funds, transfer to special aid fund, that's the fund where we provide our summer school for the summer special ed program. The state picks up 80%, we pick up 20%, so that's the transfer that we do there, pretty much right on budget. We did transfer 2.1 million for the buses that we talked about. We also transferred 336,000 for the bond anticipation note interest that we talked about. And new this year, legislation now requires us to cover the unfunded debts that are out there. It's not taken off the books. We still attempt to collect, but from an accounting standpoint on our financial statements, we are required to do this entry now. Looking at the revenue side, as I said, a little over 100%. Real property taxes and tax items actually were exceeded mostly because of pilots. We had an additional pilot, maybe two, that came in over what we expected. State aid, we had 729,000 excess, mainly because of Boces aid and building aid. And while we were just talking about that $1 million additional that was spent by IMS, we will see additional Boces aid coming back next year as a result of that.
So again, to clarify that important point, it's not that, whoa, Shen got a windfall in state aid. So make sure Glenn is very clear on that. It's not that Shen got a windfall in state aid, it's their expenditure-driven aids. Certain aids that you spend in 1 year, you get reimbursed the next year. So if you spend more in 1 year, you get reimbursed more the next year. And so some of those transportation and building and BOCES, those are some of those aid categories. But it's always hard for us to predict those because of the lag in processing that takes place. And so it's not about a windfall in state aid, it's that now we're just being reimbursed for the greater expenditures that we make. We do estimation on it, but the estimations are often rough based upon other factors at play, because every year there's a big debate about how much BOCES aid is going to be, or the state going to change this and those kind of things. So it's not that, it's just those expenditure-driven aids. So if we would actually expended less in those, we probably saw a reduction in state aid, but it's a reciprocal kind of relationship. Gary?
The foundation aid, state deducts for homeless youth, they actually take away money because we're taking...
In advance.
Rather than us paying a bill, they just deduct it from our state aid before they pay us.
Sounds backward.
What is the OMH acronym?
Okay, so moving on to interest income, happy to say we're about $500,000 over what we budgeted this year. Interest rates, we saw a little bit of a rise going on there, so we took advantage of that. I'm not going to hold my breath that it's going to stay there, but very happy that we ended up with as much interest this year.
So you can tell we didn't have a lot of confidence in the stock market going into this. And we really, quite frankly, we as a board don't expect us when we're budgeting next year to be budgeting $500,000 in interest. It's too volatile to see that as a viable revenue source. It's just too volatile.
Federal revenue, we saw some excess there. Our Medicaid reimbursements, where we have to file claims and then Medicaid reimburses us, had about $107,000 excess, and I can tell you we've done a lot to try to streamline that process with some new folks working in that area with the special education area, and I think they're doing a great job in cleaning up some old claims as well as improving the process going forward. The Medicare Part D, we had $63,000 more in excess, and this is the retiree drug reimbursement. Again, it's not anything we can really plan for. It's kind of a luck of the draw. But for retiree drugs, if they're eligible, we can submit for reimbursement. Other revenue items, you can take a look at that list. There's pluses and minuses. In general, about $35,000 less than what we anticipated. And then looking at our fund balance, as I said, $1.7 million under in our expenses, $1.5 million over in our revenue brings us an operational surplus of $3.2 million. We appropriated, as you recall from our budget process, $1.5 million for next year's budget to reduce taxes. And then looking at the reserves, our workers' comp reserve, we added $105,000 to that based on the recommendation from Triad. That's based on our long-term claims and the actuarial estimation of that. We reappropriated our tax surcharge reserve during the year for about 290,000, and we actually reduced it slightly. We are seeing some settlements of claims, some reduction there. I'm not sure I'd go much further than that, because, as you say, up and down Route 9 and 146, everybody's filing a tax surcharge claim. Retirement contribution reserve, we replenished what we took out this year, which was 750,000. Same thing with the employee benefit accrued liability reserve. Capital reserve, we didn't have any changes this year. We know that we've got monies there that we've accumulated over time. So we do have a good balance right now. And the TRS sub-reserve, we established that at the May board meeting. We established that new this year with $200,000 moving into that. And it's a sub-reserve of the ERS reserve. So we now have that established as well. So with all those contributions and ins and outs, we maintained our 4% fund balance. I think it's about 3.92%, which puts us in a good place for this next year. But we'll continue to repurpose savings on each of our line items and enhance programs and stay within the tax cap.
Thank you.
Thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I had just one more. I saw the $200,000 TRS sub-reserve, and now I'm relying on probably faulty memory. It seems like in order for a person who is a substitute to get any retirement credit, they have to put in so many days per year. But the contribution to the TRS is done based on their salary, even though they might not be eligible for additional reserve or retirement credit.
So the definition of TRS sub-reserve.
Oh, that's really to take care of our TRS budget line item, if at some point we decide that we need.
So it's not for substitute teachers.
No.
Oh,
That's the title of what it's called.
oh.
That's why I want you to finish.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of, again, one of those misnomers, right? So it's not about substitute teachers.
Okay.
When the new law that allows us to set up this TRS reserve, that's what is referred to as a sub-reserve. It's a funky thing.
Okay.
Who knows what's in it?
Okay.
Why people came up with that name. But yeah, so it's the name of it, not necessarily the category of people that's going in it. That's what I thought, but I want you to finish.
So what is that based on?
It's a percentage of payroll that you can do. The law is very specific about the maximum amount. So, thanks, Kathy. So again, oh, I'm sorry. So we wanted to have you as a board. I think it's important as we kind of wrap up the year, start another year, to have a high degree of confidence in terms of our financial stability, because you'll hear from our auditors coming in October, which will reinforce a lot of things you have here. So I think it's important for you to have that. Do you mind, Bob, keep transitioning?
Sure, go ahead.
So the next piece I want to walk through, and I walked through fairly quickly because you have this document in front of you, and it's a very fluid document. And so this is great for the board, it's great for me, it's great for our administrative team, because it gives us a long view of some things coming down the pipe. As you can see even here today, people start talking about, what are some of the big topic areas you're going to be discussing at the board meeting. So we know it. So it's not a guessing. So you can't say, I wish we were going to talk about it. Well, you kind of know we're going to talk about it, when we're going to talk about it. And so we try to use this to drive things. And so for instance, at the next board meeting in September, actually, let me go fast forward. The September study session, going to be a lot of plans. We have to present all these plans to the board because we have to get all these plans adopted. And so that this meeting, drink an extra cup of coffee because it's going to be a lot of plans, and we're going to try to summarize them, we're going to try to keep all the presentation to a singular presentation slide for all the people who are listening. Since the board would already have the plans in advance of, we kind of keep it very simple, provide an overview, and if there's specific questions, we'll address it versus trying to go through every detail of the plans, because quite frankly, these plans, the structured plans, don't change that significantly from year to year. So I share that, so we'll make sure we're very thoughtful of time. So we have to do this, and these are all the critical plans that drive so many things within the district, and it's important for you as a board to know. It's also important for the public to know that we just don't do stuff out of the whim. It's very thoughtful, very deliberate action that drive what we do as a school district. So again, I'm not going to go through all this. You have it. You have some of those kind of things. Just want to highlight a couple of new things that we're going to do this year. This presentation is, if you recall, a year or so ago, the board approved the donation of some old Chromebooks that we were going to access to a school in Africa. And so the people who are associated, they want to kind of come back and say, hey, this is what your Chromebook did. Because we have all these neat partnerships out there, and oftentimes I'm thinking like, man, I know about it, but the board doesn't even notice. They don't see the end result of it. So this is just one of those examples. If you want to bring somebody back on this. This is one of those things that Al has been doing with transportation. We talk about safety. Everybody thinks safety is about active shooting. This is something he's been doing with his bus drivers and some folks from, I think, Homeland Security, one of those major state federal organizations. So we want to come back and share that. Those are some of the things that again, enhancements that you probably won't even think about. The backpack program has been around for a while, but we haven't had a board conversation about the backpack program. Everybody knows about it, but it's been kind of great to see some of the statistics with it and see some of the kids, bringing some of the kids back who helped pack the backpacks and have them at the board meeting and doing some recognition of some of those kids. So I think those are wonderful things to do. So I share those kind of highlights as things, because a lot of other stuff we do, a lot of cyclical operations piece. We'll go back in. I mentioned the facilities group, so hopefully we have a facilities meeting before this, so the facilities group come back and probably provide some update to the board in November to say, hey, this is what we're talking about, this is what we're looking to do, things of that nature. Hopefully we have some update on where we are with land stuff. So again, the board has a roadmap, the public has a roadmap, and we can understand, appreciate what we're doing. So as you start seeing the cycle, we can quickly cycle away the whole year very quickly. Because a lot of stuff comes up at a certain time, certain year. We get into the budget cycle, we start the whole process again. So again, I mean, alternative schedule at some point, we're going to be coming back to say what's our status with it, what groundwork we're doing, where are we with those kind of things. These big rocks that you know that are out there as well. So you see it, the petition process, and all of a sudden we find ourselves right back to where we are today in July and August, starting this whole process again. So it's a great document for you as a board. It's a great document for us because it keeps honest people honest in terms of keeping diligent about getting work done. And I think Mrs. Stevenson, that last time we were doing the goal, said, how do we keep excited about it? Because we have a process that forces people to be, you better be pretty excited about getting the work done because it's coming. It's coming and it doesn't stop, and so you better be ready for it because if it's not you, then someone else. So therefore people are committed to this process, and that's what this is for. So even when the board looks at this, there might be some topic areas that you see on that say, hey, you know what, can we kind of pause for that meeting and have a deeper conversation about this topic? And if I know it in advance, then our preparation for it will be different than presenting. It might be, hey, here's some key focus points, and the board could have conversations around it. So that's where even this earlier conversation about hot topics. So some of those might be just, hey, can we just structure a Q&A conversation where whomever the administrator might be the person there as a resource, but it's a conversation with the board about that particular topic. Make sense?
Yep.
Thank you for that. So, Mr. President.
Just some comments on that. I think as we talked about this summer, we just went with a 2-hour retreat this summer. Typically we do 2 times 2-hour retreats, and so a lot of good ideas came forward. I think you had one in particular on the start time of high school, because other districts in the area are modifying their start times. You had some emails regarding enhancement of our drama opportunities. So all good things. The best way, I think, is to discuss how we want to get those things sort of reviewed, talked about, and then properly put on the schedule so that we give them the right amount of time both to prepare if needed or to ensure other stakeholders are there. But really the idea is to get the right conversations at the right time, backed up by the right detailed work before that. So that's the spirit I see. We want to come forward. I think over the next couple of days, probably early next week, I'd like to just sort of come back to the list and circulate that with Dr. Robertson, and so we better understand where these are and where they fit. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you.
We don't have any information on board resolutions. Typically this time of year we would start hearing some stuff about board resolutions, so maybe it's next week, and if we do, Mr. DeLallo is our point person. Shoot stuff together and have him get his head into that piece of it, so to talk to the board about it. Otherwise, Mr. President, we have some time-sensitive action items, asking the board to act on, recognize the study session, but there's certain things we just want to get in place for September 1, so with your indulgence.
Absolutely, please continue. So the first one is the approval of revised 2019-2020 tax levy. I have the paperwork in front of me, and these all require board signatures.
Again,
The only thing I saw that changed was the estimate of the STAR reimbursement went up about 2.5 million, and that got flowed through. So this, I'm willing to sign it and circulate that amongst the group. But before we do that, we want to also get a motion on this one. Go ahead, please. Mr. Gilbert first, second. Mrs. Rajat, any comments or questions on this?
so all board members have to sign the back of it.
If you're at that meeting. So if you wanted to have,
Well, no, this meeting now, just sign the revised version of it.
Right, it was presented at the last meeting.
Yeah, just sign in the revised version.
okay, here's,
Okay.
so there's two things.
I wasn't here
Things
for,
to sign, yeah.
Yes, I was at both. I'll sign them. And look for the date. If you were not at a respective meeting, then,
Can't sign it.
Right.
you know, but that's for the 8/13, for the 8/27, everybody signs. So I'll sign both, right? Well, actually, let's take a vote on this. Any other comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay. Next up is the contract amendment for Tyler Technologies. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson first, Mrs. Hoffman second. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. And the next three, number 3, 4, and 5, are all related to special education, so I think we can consolidate these. Motion on this one. First one, Mr. Gerwitz, second, Mr. Rajat. Any comments, questions on 3, 4, and 5? Not, all in favor? Okay. And let's go to staffing recommendations, transportation.
Get your sneakers on.
Yes. Thank you for having staffing on the agenda again. We are still in full active mode of making recommendations. We have 4 probationary appointments tonight. I don't believe any of the teachers are in the audience. Caitlin Fahey, E&L. Teacher, Sarah Madalena, school counselor, student support counselor. Karen McClure will be joining us for special education, and Amy McElhaney will be the new Quest teacher. Along with that, we have several term teachers, and there are no retirements on this agenda.
And I just want to point out, if you see Mr. Ripchick on the first day, he didn't renege on his resignation. We bring him back until we fill that position, because there's so many things that we need to get done that first month of school that it makes sense to have him come back, and then he'll help us with some evaluations, so.
I thought we did so.
Yeah.
No, we're in the process. We no.
Okay.
So Craig Chandler left. We filled Paul's.
Got you, I got you,
I'm
Fred
sorry.
last. Okay,
He's
so that's what
covered.
he's helping.
Craig
with.
Chandler.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I missed that. Okay.
Yes, I'm
Sorry, I
sorry.
got
We left
confused
that
too.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it's all
sorry.
good.
Yep.
Okay.
Jill, can I ask a question? I'm just curious to know why the social work position's been,
The social work position was, through planning, changed to a student support counselor position.
okay, I was just
So
curious.
that's why the elimination is, it was
We just
changing
changed, yeah.
job title and
Okay, I was just curious.
responsibility.
Okay, makes sense now.
Great question.
And we still have social workers, it's just not that.
Okay, I was concerned.
Any other questions on staffing recommendations? If not, all in favor?
Who's
Who's
first,
the
second?
motion?
Oh,
No, my mistake. Can I get a first motion? Second? So first Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Miller. All in favor?
Thank you.
I think that is it on the schedule. Mr. Delalo, any comments?
I had 3 documents. Bob mentioned that I was talking about this starting time for high school. There were 3 documents I want to distribute to the board so that you be able to read about it, okay?
Okay. So
Thanks, Gary.
before you leave, you need to sign the tax levy as well as review these documents from Gary. Any other comments? Can I have a motion to adjourn? First, second, all in favor?
Thank you.
Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you.